The train whistle pierced the air as Josephine Dixon clutched a small, worn quilt to her chest, tears streaming down her face. The Colorado landscape blurred outside the window, vast and indifferent to her pain. 12 hours ago, she'd been Mrs. Josephine Winters with a husband, a home in Boston, and a 6-month-old daughter named Lily. Now, she was a widow clutching the only memento of her baby girl after typhoid had claimed them both in the span of 3 terrible days. The year was 1876, and Josephine, now 22 and utterly alone, had sold everything to escape the memories. Colorado territory promised something new, though what that might be, she couldn't imagine. All she knew was that Boston had become a graveyard of memories. As the train pulled into the station at Silver Creek, Josephine collected her single trunk and the small carpet bag containing her most precious possessions. She'd written ahead to secure a position at the general store, arranged through her late husband's business associate. It wasn't much, but it was something to keep her fed while she figured out what remained of her life. Silver Creek, final stop before the mountain pass. The conductor called out as the train screeched to a halt. The platform was crowded with miners, traders, and families. Josephine stepped down carefully, immediately regretting her impractical Eastern boots as they sank into the mud. She looked around, trying to locate Mr. Pearson, the store owner who was supposed to meet her. Miss Dixon. A thin man with spectacles approached. Alfred Pearson. Welcome to Silver Creek. Josephine nodded, attempting to smile. Thank you for meeting me. Not at all. My wife has prepared a room for you above the store. It's small but clean. He glanced at her trunk. Is this all you've brought? Yes, I travel light now. Pearson seemed to understand something in her tone and didn't press further. He waved over a boy to help with her trunk, and they made their way down the muddy Main Street. Silver Creek was nothing like Boston, a collection of wooden buildings, muddy streets, and the constant buzz of a frontier town on the edge of wilderness. The general store stood near the center of town, a 2-story building with a false front and a wide porch. Mrs. Pearson, a plump woman with kind eyes, greeted Josephine warmly. You poor dear, traveling all this way alone. Come in, come in. I've made fresh bread and stew. Josephine found herself seated at a table in the back room of the store, a bowl of steaming stew in front of her that she couldn't bring herself to eat. Her carpet bag sat at her feet, the corner of Lily's quilt peeking out. Mrs. Pearson noticed. What a lovely bit of handiwork, she said, nodding toward the quilt. Josephine's fingers trembled as she tucked the fabric deeper into the bag. Thank you, it was. It's just something I keep with me. That night, alone in her small room above the store, Josephine unpacked her few belongings. She placed her husband's pocket watch on the small table and carefully laid Lily's quilt across the narrow bed. In the quiet darkness, she traced the tiny stitches she had sewn while waiting for her daughter to arrive, each one filled with hope and dreams now turned to dust. I'm so sorry, my sweet girl, she whispered into the empty room. I don't know how to live in a world without you. Dawn broke too early. Josephine, dressed in her plain black dress, pinned her chestnut hair severely back and headed downstairs to begin her new life as a shopkeeper's assistant. The work was straightforward, stocking shelves, tallying accounts, and serving customers. It kept her hands busy, though her mind wandered constantly to what might have been. The people of Silver Creek were curious about the new Eastern woman in town. Some were kind, others merely nosy. Josephine answered their questions politely but briefly, sharing nothing of her heartbreak. You'll get used to the altitude, Mrs. Pearson assured her when she found Josephine breathless after carrying a crate of canned goods. And the dust. And the men, she added with a knowing look as a group of miners entered the store. 2 weeks into her new life, Josephine had established a routine of work and solitude. Each night, she would hold Lily's quilt, allowing herself to cry only in those private moments before sleep claimed her. One afternoon, as she was arranging a display of fabric, the store's bell jangled, and the entire atmosphere seemed to shift. Conversations quieted, and Josephine looked up to see a tall man in worn range clothes standing in the doorway. His face was partially hidden by a week's worth of beard, but his eyes, blue as a summer sky, scanned the room with quiet authority. "Wade," Mr. Pearson called out, "good to see you in town. Cattle drive finish early." Wade Zimmerman removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with sun. "Lost a few head in the river crossing, but got the rest to Fort Collins yesterday." His voice was deep and graveled, as if he didn't use it much. "This is Miss Dixon," Pearson said, gesturing toward Josephine. "Just arrived from back east. Miss Dixon, this is Wade Zimmerman. Owns the Cross Z Ranch about 10 miles north." Josephine nodded politely. "Mr. Zimmerman." Those blue eyes assessed her briefly. "Madam," he turned back to Pearson, "need supplies, heading back up tomorrow." As Wade Zimmerman moved through the store, selecting goods with efficiency, Josephine felt the weight of curious glances from other customers. Later, when Mrs. Pearson brought her a cup of tea, she explained, "Wade Zimmerman doesn't come to town often. Keeps to himself since he lost his wife 3 years ago. Childbirth," she added in a whisper. "Baby didn't make it either. He's been running that ranch alone ever since, just him and his cowhands." Josephine's heart gave a painful twinge of recognition. Another soul who knew the particular hell she lived in. The next day brought news that shook the small community. A band of outlaws had hit a homestead 15 miles south, killing the husband and leaving the wife badly injured. "They're bringing her to Doc Henderson, Mrs. Pearson reported, wringing her hands. "Those Blackwell boys have been causing trouble all through the territory." By evening, word spread that the young woman had succumbed to her injuries, leaving behind 3 small children now in the care of a neighbor family already struggling to feed their own. The tragedy stirred something in Josephine that had been dormant since her own loss. That night, instead of merely holding Lily's quilt, she found herself running her fingers over the tiny embroidered flowers that decorated its border. Each one had been stitched with such care and hope. Would those orphan children have anything to remember their mother by? The following Sunday, after church service, Josephine approached the neighbor family who had taken in the orphans. Mrs. Taylor was clearly overwhelmed, trying to manage 7 children under the age of 10. "I wondered if I might help," Josephine offered. "Perhaps I could take the children for a few hours each week to give you some time." Mrs. Taylor's relief was palpable. "You're an angel, Miss Dixon. The little ones, they're so confused, especially Mary. She's just 4 and keeps asking when her mama is coming back." That afternoon, Josephine found herself surrounded by 3 solemn-faced children in the small room behind the general store. 8-year-old Thomas was protective of his sisters, standing stiffly while 6-year-old Anna clung to his hand and little Mary sucked her thumb in silence. "Would you like to see something special?" Josephine asked, reaching for her carpet bag. She brought out Lily's quilt and spread it across her lap. "This was made for someone I loved very much." Mary's eyes widened at the colorful patches and tiny stitched flowers. After a moment's hesitation, she came closer, touching the fabric with a small finger. "Pretty," she whispered. "Yes," Josephine agreed, her voice thick. "Very pretty." Over the next few weeks, Josephine's afternoons with the Williams children became a fixture in her routine. She read to them, taught the girls simple sewing, and helped Thomas with his letters. The ache in her heart didn't disappear, but it changed, making room for these children who needed her. Wade Zimmerman returned to town in early June, his wagon loaded with wool from the spring shearing. Josephine was sweeping the store's porch when he approached, looking much the same as before, tall, weathered, self-contained. "Miss Dixon," he greeted her with a tip of his hat. "Mr. Zimmerman. Mr. Pearson is expecting you." He nodded, but instead of continuing inside, he paused. "Heard you've been helping those Williams children." Surprised, Josephine leaned her broom against the wall. "I have. They're wonderful children." Something that might have been approval flickered across his face. "Good of you. Town needs more folks willing to help." Before she could respond, Mary came running up the street, her small face lighting up at the sight of Josephine. Miss Joe, I found a butterfly." Josephine knelt to admire the child's discovery, aware of Wade Zimmerman watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. When she looked up again, he was gone, striding into the store without another word. That evening, as Josephine sat on her bed mending one of Anna's dresses, a knock at her door startled her. Mrs. Pearson stood outside, holding a package wrapped in brown paper. "This came for you," she said with curious eyes. Mr. Zimmerman left it before he headed back to his ranch. Puzzled, Josephine unwrapped the package to find 3 small wooden animals, a horse, a bear, and a rabbit, each smoothly carved and polished to a soft sheen. "Well, Mrs. Pearson said with raised eyebrows. "That's interesting." No note accompanied the gifts, but Josephine knew they were meant for the children. The next day, when Thomas, Anna, and Mary came for their visit, she presented them with the carvings. Their delight was palpable, especially Thomas, who examined the horse with undisguised awe. "Who made these?" he asked. "Mr. Zimmerman from the Cross Z Ranch," Josephine replied. Thomas's eyes widened. "The cowboy with the big herd. Pa once said he was the best horseman in the county." Josephine found herself curious about the solitary rancher who carved animals for orphaned children. Over the next few days, she gathered bits of information from various townspeople. Wade Zimmerman had come to Colorado 10 years earlier, built his ranch from nothing, and was known as a fair employer to his hands. He'd married a schoolteacher who'd arrived from Illinois, only to lose her and their unborn child 3 years later. Since then, he kept to himself except for necessary business in town. A week passed before Wade returned to Silver Creek, this time on horseback rather than wagon. Josephine was reading to Mary on the store's porch when he approached, his tall form casting a long shadow in the late afternoon sun. "Mr. Zimmerman," she greeted him. "Mary, this is the gentleman who carved your rabbit." The child looked up shyly. "Thank you, sir. I named her Hoppy." Something in Wade's expression softened. "Good name." He turned to Josephine. "Could I have a word, Miss Dixon?" Curious, Josephine asked Mrs. Pearson to watch Mary and followed Wade to the edge of the porch. "I've been thinking about those children," he said without preamble. "The Taylors can't keep them much longer. Too many mouths to feed." Josephine's heart sank. "Where will they go?" "That's what I wanted to discuss." He shifted, looking uncomfortable. "I have room at the ranch. Thought maybe they could stay there, at least until proper arrangements are made." Surprised, Josephine studied his face. "It's very kind of you to offer, but those children need more than just shelter. They need care, attention." "I know that," he interrupted, then seemed to catch himself. "What I mean is, I was hoping you might consider coming too, as their caretaker." The proposal was so unexpected that Josephine could only stare at him. "You want me to come to your ranch to look after the children?" Wade ran a hand through his hair. "I have a house, bigger than it needs to be. Built it for a family that never happened. The children would have their own rooms, space to play, and you'd have proper quarters, not this little room above the store." "Mr. Zimmerman, I barely know you." "Mrs. Peterson from the church would come too, as a companion for propriety's sake." She's a widow, needs the work. I've already spoken to her." He met her gaze directly. "Those children need stability, Miss Dixon, and I have the means to provide it." Josephine thought of the Williams children, especially little Mary, who still cried for her mother at night. She thought of Mrs. Taylor's exhausted face and the whispers around town about sending the children to an orphanage in Denver. "May I have some time to consider?" Wade nodded. "I'll be in town until tomorrow. Talk to Mrs. Peterson if you like." That night, Josephine lay awake, Lily's quilt clutched in her hands. The prospect of living at the remote ranch with a man she hardly knew was daunting, yet the thought of the children being separated and sent to an orphanage was worse. By morning, she had made her decision. Mrs. Peterson, a practical woman in her 60s, assured Josephine that Wade Zimmerman was a man of his word. "He's rough around the edges, but decent through and through. Keeps his distance from folks because of his grief, but I never heard anyone speak ill of him." 2 days later, Josephine found herself in a wagon beside Mrs. Peterson, with the 3 Williams children squeezed between them. Their few belongings were packed behind them, along with Josephine's trunk and carpet bag. Wade rode alongside on his horse, occasionally pointing out landmarks as they traveled north of Silver Creek. The Cross Z Ranch came into view after several hours, a sprawling main house made of sturdy logs with a wide porch, several outbuildings and corrals filled with horses. In the distance, cattle grazed on rolling grasslands that stretched toward distant mountains. "It's beautiful," Josephine murmured, surprised by the scale and order of the operation. Wade helped them down from the wagon. "Let me show you inside." The house was larger than Josephine expected, with a great room centered around a stone fireplace, a spacious kitchen with a cast iron stove, and several bedrooms down a hallway. Everything was clean but plain, clearly a man's domain with little ornamentation. "The children can have these 3 rooms," Wade said, indicating doors along one side of the hall. "Yours is here, Mrs. Peterson's across the hall, mine's at the far end." Josephine's room was simple but comfortable, with a bed, dresser, washstand, and a window overlooking a small garden that had seen better days. As she set her carpet bag on the bed, she felt a strange mixture of trepidation and relief. This place, so far from everything she had known, might offer a fresh start not just for the Williams children, but for her as well. That evening, after the children were settled in their new rooms, Josephine sat on the edge of her bed and carefully unfolded Lily's quilt. In this quiet room, surrounded by strangers in an unfamiliar place, she allowed herself to weep softly, tracing the tiny flowers with her fingertips. A soft knock at her door made her hastily wipe her eyes. "Yes." Wade stood in the hallway, awkward and tall. His eyes fell to the quilt in her hands, and something like recognition flickered across his face. "I just wanted to make sure you have everything you need," he said. "Yes, thank you. The room is very comfortable." He nodded, his gaze still on the quilt. "That's fine work." Josephine's fingers tightened on the fabric. "I made it for my daughter." A long silence stretched between them. "Mrs. Pearson mentioned you lost your family," Wade finally said, his voice low. "I'm sorry." "And I for yours," Josephine replied. Another pause filled with unspoken understanding. "If there's anything else you need." He began. "Actually," Josephine said, surprising herself, "I noticed the garden is a bit overgrown. I'd like to tend it if you don't mind. The children could help. It would be good for them to have something to care for." A brief smile touched Wade's lips, transforming his stern face. "My wife started that garden. I haven't had the heart to do much with it. She'd be glad to see it brought back. Then I'll start tomorrow." Wade turned to go, then paused. "The quilt," he said without looking back. "You can keep it here if you want. It's safe here." The simple statement, carrying more weight than its few words suggested, brought fresh tears to Josephine's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. In the days that followed, a rhythm developed at the Cross Z Ranch. Wade left early each morning to work with his cattle and horses, returning at midday for a meal before heading out again until evening. Josephine established a routine for the children: breakfast, lessons at the kitchen table, chores appropriate to their ages, and time to play. Mrs. Peterson helped with cooking and taught Anna how to make simple biscuits. The garden became Josephine's special project. She enlisted Thomas to help clear the weeds, while Mary and Anna gathered stones to line the paths between the beds. Wade observed their progress from a distance, saying little but occasionally bringing seeds or young plants from his trips to town. One evening, as Josephine sat on the porch after the children were asleep, Wade joined her, offering a cup of coffee. "The garden's looking better," he commented. "Sarah would have liked what you're doing with it." "Sarah was your wife," he nodded, his profile strong against the darkening sky. "She loved growing things, said it gave her hope to see something new come up from the ground." Josephine sipped her coffee. "My husband James was a banker. He had plans for us to move west eventually, but not like this, not to a place so wild. You get used to it," Wade said. "The space, the quiet, starts to feel like freedom after a while." They sat in companionable silence until the stars emerged. It was the first of many such evenings, quiet conversations that gradually revealed more of their past lives and present thoughts. July brought scorching heat and afternoon thunderstorms that rattled the windows. During one such storm, Josephine found little Mary hiding under her bed, crying in terror at each crack of thunder. "It's all right, sweetheart," she soothed, pulling the child onto her lap. "Just the sky having a little tantrum." Mary buried her face against Josephine's shoulder. "I want my mama." The words pierced Josephine's heart. She reached for Lily's quilt, which now lay folded at the foot of her bed rather than hidden in her carpet bag. "Here, let me wrap you in this special blanket," she said, enfolding the child in the colorful fabric. "My mama made quilts like this when I was little. She said they were magic because they were made with love, and love is the strongest magic there is." Mary's sobs quieted as she snuggled into the quilt. "Did you make this for your little girl?" Josephine's breath caught. "Yes." "How did you know about her?" "I heard Mrs. Peterson telling Mr. Wade that you had a baby in heaven like his baby." "That's right," Josephine said softly. "Her name was Lily. Is she with my mama now?" "I believe she is." Mary considered this, her small fingers tracing the embroidered flowers. "Then she's not alone, and neither are we." Josephine held the child close, her own tears mingling with Mary's as the storm raged outside. Neither noticed Wade standing in the doorway, watching them with an expression of mingled pain and tenderness before quietly withdrawing. The next morning, Wade announced at breakfast that he needed to ride to a neighboring ranch to help with a difficult calving. "I'll be back tomorrow," he told Josephine. "Simmons knows to check on you if you need anything." Simmons was Wade's foreman, a taciturn older man who kept the ranch running smoothly. He had a soft spot for the children, especially Thomas, who followed him around asking endless questions about horses and cattle. That night, with a full moon illuminating the landscape, Josephine sat on the porch long after the others had gone to bed. The vast openness of the land still sometimes took her breath away, so different from the crowded streets of Boston. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her stand, peering into the darkness. Relief flooded through her when she recognized Wade's tall form on his distinctive black gelding. "You're back early," she called as he dismounted. "Calving went quicker than expected," he replied, securing his horse to the rail. "Why are you still up?" "Couldn't sleep. It's too beautiful a night to waste." He climbed the porch steps and sat beside her on the bench, removing his hat. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the moonlight play across the distant mountains. "I saw you with Mary yesterday during the storm," Wade finally said. "You're good with her, with all of them." Josephine felt a blush warm her cheeks. "They make it easy. They're wonderful children. They've taken to you, like they've always known you. Children are resilient that way. They know who truly cares for them." Wade turned to look at her, his face half shadowed in the moonlight. "And you? Has this place been too hard on you?" "No," Josephine answered truthfully. "It's been healing in a way, having purpose again, seeing the children thrive." His hand moved closer to hers on the bench between them, not quite touching. "I've been thinking about their future. They need permanence, not just temporary care." "What are you suggesting?" "I could adopt them, legally. Give them my name, my protection." Josephine stared at him. "That's a tremendous responsibility, I know, but they deserve a home, a family." His eyes held hers steadily. "And so do you, Josephine." The use of her first name, spoken in his deep voice, sent a tremor through her. "What exactly are you saying, Wade?" "I'm saying that in these past weeks, watching you with those children, seeing how you've brought life back to this place, I've started to hope again. For things I thought were lost to me forever." His hand finally covered hers, warm and calloused. "I'm not asking for love, not yet, but I'm offering partnership, a home for you and those children, and maybe in time something more." Josephine looked down at their joined hands. "I didn't come here looking for this." "Neither did I," Wade admitted. "But here we are." She thought of Boston, of the grave she'd left behind, of the life she'd once planned. Then she thought of Mary wrapped in Lily's quilt, of Thomas proudly showing Wade how he'd repaired the garden gate, of Anna singing as she gathered eggs in the morning. "I need time to think," she said finally. Wade nodded, squeezing her hand once before releasing it. "Take all the time you need." "I'm not going anywhere." The full impact of Wade's proposal kept Josephine awake most of the night. Marriage had not been in her plans when she came west. Her heart was too broken, her grief too fresh. Yet in the months since arriving at the Cross Z, something had changed. The children had filled empty spaces in her days, and Wade had quietly become a steady presence she found herself looking for, a voice she listened for, a person whose rare smile could brighten her entire day. In the morning light, she knew her answer. She found Wade in the barn, checking a mare's injured leg. He straightened when she entered, his expression guarded but hopeful. "The children need parents," Josephine said without preamble, "not just a guardian and a caretaker." Wade's jaw tightened. "I know that. If we do this, it has to be real. A true marriage, a true family, not just an arrangement for convenience." His eyes widened slightly. "Are you saying yes?" "I'm saying I'm willing to try, to build something new together." She took a deep breath. "I may never forget James and Lily, just as you'll always remember Sarah and your child. But perhaps there's room in our hearts for more than memories." Wade stepped closer, reaching for her hands. "I never thought I'd want to try again. Until you came here with those children and made this place feel like a home again." Josephine looked up at him, seeing the man beneath the tough exterior, a man who had suffered, who understood loss, who carved wooden animals for orphan children. "Then yes, Wade Zimmerman, I will marry you." His smile, rare and transformative, lit his entire face. With gentle hands, he drew her closer and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that held promise rather than passion, a beginning, not an ending. They were married 2 weeks later in Silver Creek's small church, with Mrs. Peterson, the Pearsons, and several ranch hands as witnesses. Thomas proudly stood beside Wade, while Anna and Mary scattered wildflowers from the ranch garden as Josephine walked down the aisle in a new blue dress. That evening, after a celebratory dinner and putting the excited children to bed, Wade and Josephine stood in the doorway of what was now their bedroom, transformed with her few possessions. On the bed lay Lily's quilt, carefully spread across the foot. "Are you sure?" Wade asked quietly, noticing her gaze on the quilt. "Yes," Josephine answered, taking his hand. "It belongs here now, with us." Autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson as the newly formed Zimmerman family settled into their life together. The adoption was finalized, giving Thomas, Anna, and Mary the security of a permanent home and legal parents. Wade taught Thomas to ride and care for his own pony, while Josephine instructed the girls in reading and arithmetic at the kitchen table each morning. The transition to husband and wife took time. Both carried scars from their past losses, moments of grief that would suddenly surface without warning. But they found in each other a unique understanding, a patience born of shared experience. Nights that began with companionable conversation on the porch gradually evolved into deeper intimacy, rediscovering the joy of connection neither had expected to find again. By Christmas, when snow blanketed the ranch and pine boughs decorated the great room, the change in the house was remarkable. Children's laughter echoed through rooms once silent. Handmade decorations brightened walls previously bare. And at the center of it all, Wade and Josephine moved in the easy rhythm of partners who had found their way to each other through the wilderness of grief. On Christmas morning, after the children had opened their gifts, new boots for Thomas, dolls for the girls, books for all three, Wade handed Josephine a small wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of cotton, lay a gold locket. When opened, it revealed a tiny compartment. "For memories," Wade said softly. "Both old and new." Josephine touched it gently. "It's beautiful." That night, after the children were asleep, dreams of sugar plums dancing in their heads, Josephine sat before the fire with Wade, her head resting against his shoulder. "I have something to tell you," she said, taking his hand and placing it over her abdomen. "Something unexpected." Wade's breath caught as understanding dawned in his eyes. "Are you certain?" "Dr. Henderson confirmed it yesterday when I went to town. A baby, sometime in June." For a moment, Wade sat perfectly still, his face a complex mixture of joy and fear. Then he gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she were made of precious glass. "This doesn't replace what we lost," Josephine whispered against his chest. "Nothing ever could." "No," Wade agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "But it's a new chapter, a continuation of our story." Later, as they prepared for bed, Josephine carefully folded Lily's quilt and placed it in the cedar chest at the foot of their bed. She ran her fingers over the familiar stitches one last time before closing the lid. "You don't have to put it away," Wade said, watching her. Josephine smiled up at him. "I'm not putting it away forever, just saving it for when our new little one arrives." A quilt made with love is too precious not to be used. Spring arrived with tender green shoots in Josephine's garden and the quickening of new life within her. The children, excited about the prospect of a baby brother or sister, helped prepare a nursery in the room adjacent to the master bedroom. Thomas built a small shelf with Wade's guidance, while Anna and Mary painted wildflowers along its edge. On a warm June evening, as fireflies danced outside the windows and a gentle rain pattered on the roof, Josephine gave birth to a healthy baby girl with Wade's blue eyes and a dusting of dark hair. The children, waiting anxiously with Mrs. Peterson in the great room, rushed in to meet their new sister as soon as Wade called them. "She's so tiny," Mary whispered in awe, reaching out a careful finger to touch the baby's hand. "What's her name?" Thomas asked, standing tall at the foot of the bed. Wade and Josephine exchanged a look of perfect understanding. "Hope," Josephine answered. Her name is Hope. That night, as the ranch settled into quiet and the older children slept soundly in their beds, Wade sat beside Josephine as she nursed their daughter. From the cedar chest, he had retrieved Lily's quilt, now washed and soft, and placed it gently around the baby's tiny form. "Is this all right?" he asked, his voice low. Josephine looked down at Hope, wrapped in the quilt she had made with so much love and anticipation for another child in another life. Then she looked up at Wade, this man who had helped her rebuild from ashes, who understood both her grief and her capacity for joy. "It's perfect," she said, reaching for his hand. "This is exactly where it belongs." As dawn broke over the Cross Z Ranch, painting the sky in shades of promise, the Zimmerman family slept peacefully beneath its roof. Wade and Josephine, Thomas, Anna, Mary, and newborn Hope. And wrapped around the baby, connecting past to present and weaving threads of memory with new beginnings, Lily's quilt told its own story of love lost and found again on the Colorado frontier. In the years that followed, the quilt would be used for each new addition to their family, for Samuel, born 2 years after Hope, and for twin girls Elizabeth and Catherine, who arrived 3 years later. It would be spread on the grass for picnics, wrapped around feverish children during illness, and displayed proudly at each child's wedding. Eventually, worn thin with love and use, it would be carefully preserved in a glass case in the expanded Zimmerman home, a testament to the woman who had once cried over her baby's quilt and found the courage to love again. And whenever visitors asked about the old, faded quilt in its place of honor, Josephine would smile and tell them, "It's more than fabric and thread. It's the beginning of our story, how a broken-hearted mother and a lonely cowboy found healing in each other's arms and built a family from fragments of hope."